Hi, welcome to Off Script. I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Today on the show, we're taking a look at David Fincher's new Netflix feature, The Killer. It was in theaters for 1 week. I think it might still be in theaters right now. If you're listening to this today, you may still be able to catch it. Andy and I barely caught it. We didn't even tease it last week because we weren't sure we were going to catch it, but we saw it. We're excited to talk about it. We're also going to talk about Past Lives, the A24 feature from Celine Song. First-time director, incredible work. This thing's been getting buzz like After Sun got last year. We finally watched it. We paid VOD prices to watch it because we sacrifice blood and sweat and tears for this show. And I'm excited to talk about Past Lives. It's really good stuff. Stick around for the review. We got to talk about this Variety article out of Variety regarding Marvel and the MCU
in
and
crisis.
Disney in crisis. It is all people have been talking about on Twitter. I am so excited we have the opportunity to speak on it here on Off Script. As predicted by Off Script, a lot of good stuff in there that we predicted that came true. So we're going to do a full breakdown of the whole thing in our Death of Cinema segment in the middle. Before we get to all of it, we need to talk about the news. A quick PSA before our first story this week. I just saw this on Twitter before we started the show. Barnes & Noble's big annual Criterion Collection sale is kicking off November 3rd through December 5th. If you're listening to the show today on the 2nd, that's starting tomorrow. So odds are, if you're hearing this, you can go get Criterions for up to 50% off at Barnes & Noble. Crazy. They do them online. I don't know how they can afford it, but it's a big deal every year. So yeah, if you're looking for, a little stocking stuffer or something, go grab yourself a couple of fine films from the good people at B&N. Our first story this week, Disney delays Snow White and Elio a year and removes Jonathan Majors' magazine dreams from calendar. Disney's already making headlines. Like I said, we're talking about it in our Death of Cinema segment this week. But there were some shakeups amid the actors' strike. They've got to move some things around, I think. By the way, reportedly they're talking. No updates, though. Strike's still on. It seems like Snow White's getting moved. Elio's getting moved. Jonathan Majors is off the map, which is a whole other story. Andy, what do you think?
Man, we knew that the strikes would cause delays. We saw things like Poor Things move and Dune 2, which was already supposed to be out. And we knew that more would be to follow. So these are the first casualties. Snow White is moving from March 2024 to March 2025, a full year. Elio moved back 14 months. This was also supposed to be a March release, March 2024. This is now coming out summer 25. That's the new Pixar film, which we don't know a whole lot about. And then the big one, or one of the big disappointments, Magazine Dreams being completely pulled off the slate because Jonathan Majors has a criminal trial starting at the end of this month, and that movie would have come out exactly in the middle of that trial, so they're not gonna have that in there. One of the big movies that hasn't moved, but it's probably going to, is Deadpool 3, which is supposed to come out in May 2024, like 7-8 months from now. No way that keeps that release date. The strikes have just been too long, and that movie's been out of production. So it's just part of the dominoes we knew were going to fall.
It has been such a treat watching Deadpool 3 director Sean Levy beg on Twitter, please work this out. I want my movie to come out next summer. It's going to be a hit. I know it. He's tweeted about it 3 times. It's funny it's funnier every time. It's a bummer that this is happening, but let's be honest with ourselves. Disney has not exactly been a cooperative player in the actors' strikes. Apparently Disney, along with the other studios in the AMPTP, have really been cracking down. They don't want to play around with this stuff, especially reportedly regarding AI content and how they'll use actors. It's a bummer. I don't like hearing it. You don't like hearing it. It seems like we want the people on screen, the people we have parasocial relationships, to obviously get a good deal, but this has to be a livable industry. And Bob Iger makes enough money. He's fine. You know what I mean? He is not hurting for cash. I think he can afford to pay his actors a little more. I think he can probably afford to pay them every time they use their likeness and not just sign some sweet deal where they can chat GPT him into a movie. I think that's a reasonable thing. I don't think anybody's expecting too much. Yeah, it costs a lot to live in LA, but that's where the industry is, Actors got to work. Anyway, that's me on the actor strike. Reportedly, they're working on it. I hope they figure it out. In the meantime, dude, when did they shoot Snow White? 2022? I can't believe this movie hasn't come out yet.
I don't
There's
know. This still that came out looks awful. I
it's
can't tell
real
if this is
bad.
a painting or a photo or a still because everything about it looks bad.
It's real bad. If you haven't seen it, it's Rachel Ziegler as Snow White, obviously her lead. She's dressed up in the very traditional outfit, right? Blue top with some red trim, big yellow dress, yellow red shoes. She's sitting in a chair in the middle of the frame in the dwarves' workshop, surrounded by our 7 dwarves, and they are all CGI. It is so great. God, I love the internet. Yeah, the takes that have been coming out about this thing since it dropped have been white hot. There was some controversy about this too. Disney didn't want to use little people. That was a whole thing. They wanted to say that they were making something else, and then this is, I guess, what they came up with. And it's like I once again, I don't think anybody's happy. Disney comes out on the short end of the stick again. It's L after L from these people.
Yeah, it's bad, and it is only getting worse. And we're gonna deep dive into that a lot more in our middle segment.
That's true. Yeah. In the meantime, on horror, we did just wrap up October. We do need to talk about the sequel to a very recently reviewed off-script feature. It Follows is getting a sequel out of nowhere. Nobody saw this coming from director David Robert Mitchell. It's going to star Micah Monroe, who was the lead in It Follows. The film is going to be called They Follow. This David Robert Mitchell is an odd director. We just covered him a couple weeks ago on the show. You should totally go back and check out the review or find it on YouTube. My man has not done much since It Follows, right, Andy?
He has done one other film, Under the Silver Lake, which was not particularly well received, and he's kind of been in director jail since then. And it's so funny that we were just talking about him, and we reviewed It Follows just a couple of weeks ago, and now we hear this news. I just about lost my mind when I saw this. I was like, it can't be real, because we were just talking about this, how he needs to. It'd be great to see another movie from him, and then what do we get? We get the sequel to, I think one of the best horror movies in the last 10 years or so. We don't know much. We know it's called They Follow. There's some speculation that our cast of heroes is going to try and trace the curse back to its origin and stop it. But we really don't know. The fun thing that I think is that this cast is very young from the first film, so we're going to get to see adult versions of them, and that I think that'll be a really fun thing. I don't think Paul's going to last long in this sequel, but we'll see.
Oh, dude, Paul's toast. He'll be the first to go. That'll be the start of the movie. Yeah, this is really unique. Once again, as predicted by Oscar Film Review, we didn't predict he'd make a sequel to It Follows, but we were definitely talking about this weeks ago. And Andy has been championing It Follows for a long time, like more than a few years. He's been like, hey, you should check out this movie. So I'm glad we watched it for the show. We also watched Under the Silver Lake when it came out. Weird movie that as time goes on, especially since I've watched It Follows, I think I may revisit it at some point. You can definitely check out a review from way back in the day on that movie. But like the man's got talent. Like David Robert Mitchell can make a movie for sure. He just doesn't make movies like anybody else. So I'm really interested to see what They Follow is bringing to the table, because It Follows has such a unique like lens that it sees
Everything about
through. Yeah. And like after having seen Under the Silver Lake, I'm like, okay, this is our guy. Like this is the kind of movie he makes. It will not be a normal feature. It will be non-traditional, and that's exciting. Why he hasn't gotten more work in the meantime, I couldn't tell you. Like, what has he been doing? I don't know if he's been producing. I don't know, but like I'm excited he's got another feature. I'm excited Micah Monroe is going to be back. Check out our reviews of It Follows and Under the Silver Lake. I suppose that's what I got for you, and we'll cover They Follow when it comes out. Five Nights at Freddy's is spooking up some big numbers at the box office, Andy. But critics say it's a bomb. What's happening? How does this happen in movie theaters, right?
So again, it just goes to show that they were saying 100 years ago at the MGM studios, you can't predict the film business. Like, you'd never know what's going to hit and connect with audiences. Five Nights at Freddy's was looking at a $50 million opening, which was going to be stellar, and it knocked that out of the park with an $80 million domestic opening and $130 million global opening haul, and it's a cheap movie made for about 30 million, or actually less. I think it's actually 15 to 20 million. Very cheap movie, huge hit, and it's based on a kid's video game that I have not played. This is aimed at much younger audiences, like 10 to 13-year-olds, and it's a huge hit. Kids all came out and their parents to see this. I don't know anything about this property. Apparently it's very lore heavy, but it's knocking it out of the park. Critics gave it like 20% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. They all said it was terrible, but it's definitely found an audience. Already greenlit sequels.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, Blumhouse is all about it. Yeah. Five Nights at Freddy's is a smart pickup for them because it's already got a built-in audience. Just like Andy said, there's already people who have played like the 5 games. I remember seeing this stuff at Hot Topic. I never played it. Andy never played it. We're just kind of low-key too old for that. Like I play video games, but I never got into these. But there were a bunch of kids who played it who obviously now are well over the age of PG-13 and can afford the ticket price for a movie that is, on its face, has some things that seem to work. I know we haven't seen it, but I just want to clarify. Number one, the creature suits seem real cool. Jim Henson's Creature Shop made them. They're almost all practical. That's cool stuff. You gotta love practical effects. And from what I've heard, it is otherwise like pretty light, but it's a PG-13 flick. It's like just a vehicle to get a property into a movie theater to make money. You know what I mean? They were like, we don't even need any big, we don't need Spielberg out here making this movie. Nobody called Rob Pattinson to come to the Five Nights at Freddy's feature. Like, it's just like low key and small and it's safe. It's the exact kind of movie that Disney would never make, right? Like they're going big and bold and then getting slammed with Indiana Jones being a huge box office bomb. I don't know. I have no interest in Five Nights at Freddy's, but I can't argue the strategy. Like it seems like a good way to make some money, right?
I mean, when a kids movie hits, it hits. There aren't a lot of kid family friendly offerings, and this was a great kind of Halloween release. It's a fun, friendly movie. It's not like dark, hard, R-rated, gory horror. It's PG-13. You could take your kids to it, take the family. It's fine. Like any movie that hits like that, where you can have something to take the kids to that you're not gonna hate sitting through is always going to do well, and that's kind of what's happening. I've been blown away by the amount. The numbers of this are just incredible. And yeah, like I said, I don't know anything about it, but it's a hit, and we'll kind of see where that goes moving forward with these sequels.
You know who I really want to know? Whose opinion I really want to hear on this? Martin Scorsese, of course. Because Scorsese has Killers of the Flower Moon in theaters, and he's been doing a ton of press because SAG-AFTRA has been shut down, and actors haven't been able to do press, so he's been doing press for the movie, right? You've seen interviews of him, and Scorsese has been obviously very vocal about Marvel and saying infamously that it's not like real cinema, and that's been a whole thing. But lately, he's been doing like TikToks with his granddaughter. That have been making the rounds on the internet. Like he seems to have kind of loosened up a little bit, not on Marvel per se, but I'd be curious to see how he feels about like his adult skewing Killers of the Flower Moon, a couple weeks in, coming in third behind a concert film and Five Nights at Freddy's, a film that is a critical bomb. He's been in theaters for years, like what does that look like? What does that say about the cinema landscape? I wish I could say. I know it's a couple weeks out and it's Halloween. There's a ton of reasons these movies are doing as well as they are, but it is unique. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the great things about cinema, that like we can see unique features on the screen. It's not simply limited to, 2-hour B movies or anything. Like you can go see a weird Five Nights at Freddy's flick or the Eras tour or a 3.5 hour long Killer of the Flower Moon. One thing seems for sure: the things that are being successful are the projects that are unique and different. And the same old, like just doesn't seem to be cutting it for the most part. But speaking of things that are unique and different, we got to talk about a unique and different feature on the show this week. Andy pointed this out late last week.
Last minute.
Texted me one day and said, hey, The Killer's in theater this week. We should go see it. And I was dumbfounded because The Killer is a David Fincher film. And Fincher, for a long time, was probably my favorite director. I think he's kind of fallen out of favor lately just because he's taken on some different work. And notably that I want to mention in this review, he has he signed a 4-picture deal with Netflix. And so kind of like after Mindhunter's 2-season success, he signed a deal with them and he made Mank. And that was his first picture in this deal. And this is picture number 2. It's The Killer. But Netflix, unlike Amazon, or unlike Apple, really, doesn't distribute their films big in theaters, right? They put them out in theaters for a week in some places in very limited markets, and then they wait a couple weeks and then they drop it on Netflix. So it's funny because today you can actually watch The Killer on Netflix. It's available there. Going forward, that's where it'll be. But Andy and I got to see it in the theater. I don't want to beat around the bush anymore. The movie is The Killer. So The Killer is a David Fincher film starring Michael Fassbender as a very cold, very calculating, very elite assassin. It's modern day, hyper modern day, including product placements from McDonald's, Amazon, DoorDash, Starbucks. Yeah, like tons of FedEx is in here at one point. And our man is a globetrotting loner who is simply taking jobs and completing them to the most cold and calculating fashion possible. Following a very exciting intro scene, the movie opens with almost like a 15-minute like quiet expose of him narrating to himself as he's like doing yoga and scoping out like a hit from a rooftop across a street. It's very low-key up until a hit goes wrong. And suddenly our cold, calculating, always on the mark man is off the mark. And he's thrown into chaos as this world of mercenaries and hitmen begins to crumble onto him like a house of cards. The movie stars Michael Fassbender in his primary role, has a couple other guest stars that I think are probably worth just seeing in the theater. It's a pretty small cast, and frankly, it's a pretty small budget. As Fincher's second film in his deal with Netflix, it was barely in theaters. Now it's on Netflix. Most importantly, Andy, I've got to know, what do you think of The Killer?
Man, this movie is totally wasted on Netflix. Get to a theater to see this if you can. I think it's maybe going to play for another week in theaters. Really enjoyed this. I wasn't sure where it was going initially. It starts off very slow, like Michael Fassbender has this big long monologue about how you have to be disciplined in mind, body, and soul. He's got all these very kind of unique idiosyncrasies to prepare for this hit, and he's talking through all his strategies, and he's just like waxing philosophical about how the mind that it takes to accomplish this, and then it all goes wrong, which is kind of hilarious in its own way. And then we have a killer on the run, but also trying to exact some revenge. And it's so methodical, but also it's shot so well. It has moments of really good action, really good suspense. It's shot on location in Paris, the Dominican Republic, elsewhere that I can't remember, but it's great that they actually went to these places.
Somewhere there.
Yeah. Really enjoyed it in all aspects: the cinematography, writing, acting. Like I said, I wasn't sure when it first started. I was like, I hope this whole movie isn't like this, and it's not. And I was really thrilled by it.
Yeah, the ads for The Killer say in big letters when they're promoting David Fincher, they say from the director of Seven, Fight Club, and Gone Girl. Those are perfect features from his filmography to kind of describe the tone of what's going on here. The Killer is a tight wire action thriller, and it is very clamped down for most of the time because our character, the Killer, played by Fassbender, is like a clenched jaw individual. He's just constantly, I don't know, he's constantly exacting, and he's right, and he's thinking through things. The film's actually based on a graphic novel. I didn't know this is a nearly 20-year-old project called The Killer. It's a French novel, I think. And reportedly, Fincher said after Mank in 2020, he wanted to, he had a number of ideas for projects, and he had talked with Michael Fassbender about doing something, and Fassbender really fell in love with the idea. Fassbender got super into the idea, actually, so much so that he kind of talked Fincher into doing it with him. He was like, no, I think this is the role I want. Like, this guy is neat. Like, this character is really exacting, really cold, very impersonal. IMDb also claims here, and I'd have to rewatch it. They claim Fassbender never blinks on screen. I don't know if I believe that. There's definitely some terse scenes where I feel like you could catch him getting punched in the face or something, and maybe, but like maybe that's not, maybe that doesn't count. Um, Killer is like very rigid, and Fincher's known for this in his filmography. He's a tripod director. 90% of the time when you watch a Fincher movie, it's the camera is locked down on a tripod, like every time. It might roll or pan or dolly, but like it's not moving. Surprising amount of handheld in The Killer. You could see it in the trailer, which is weird. I didn't expect things to feel as kinetic as they do, but I think as our man starts to tumble backwards through what he thought was a normal job, suddenly things start to feel uncertain, and that's where I think going handheld's a smart move.
Yeah, the style is so much about this film really pulls you in, and like the cinematography and camera work is definitely one of them. That we get again great views of these places of this kind of Paris skyline where he's overlooking several buildings, trying to scope out his hit. When we move to the uh, Dominican Republic, it's a much warmer, kind of laid back feel, and it mimics the character. It's very cold and calculating and very precise, which mimics our character's way of going about his job.
I think one of the things that's so interesting about this story that I think on its face probably sounds a little generic, right? Like, because it does, right? Oh, a hitman whose job goes wrong and then has to get out, Like, we've all seen that movie before, right? But this one is different. And I think part of the reason is because, like, it's so grounded in what a reality would be for a person who does this stuff. Like, my man has an Apple Watch that tracks his heartbeat, and he uses that effectively when he's performing hits. That's part of it. He also has an MP3 player that's completely offline with a surprising amount of the Strokes in it. I think David Fincher's a Strokes fan. I don't know if you know that, Andy. Lots of that. Listens to music real loud. If he's getting breakfast in the morning, he gets a breakfast on a bun from McDonald's and skips the bun, and most importantly, he has
Low
this
carb.
and most importantly, he has this exacting monologue, which I think is comes straight from the book. It's just very, very cold way to look at the world, like this very exacting, understanding idea that while he is a hitman and he is performing hits and eliminating people, that like ultimately in the big universal scheme of things, like it hardly matters. People die every day, right? Somebody slips and falls down their stairs. Somebody has a heart attack in the grocery store. Like, he's not tipping any scales. He is simply a part of the world he lives in. And it's a really interesting way to kind of philosophize, if that's the thing, reason with yourself that you're murdering people. And that never, fortunately, really lets up. He is just this cold dude, and I think it's great. Like a few of Fincher's films, are our lead, I don't think, has a name. I think he's just the killer in the credits, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's correct.
Because it's impersonal, right? And it's really a treat to watch this guy globetrot and what would like otherwise be almost like a secret agent movie. Almost reminded me a little like a James Bond film, like the way he moves around the world, uses alternate IDs, like to pass through airports unannounced. He smashes cell phones like 9 times in this movie, like just very efficiently moving through resources to be as leave as little footprint as possible and just be like a shadow, right? Just like a gust of wind. Like that's what he wants to be. Somebody unnoticeable and unremarkable. And then inside you find somebody who's like completely fascinating.
Yeah, it reminds me of like John le Carre novel, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, kind of. That's very slow paced, very methodical. It's not stylized spy work or wet work as they often call it. It's very very methodical, very realistic. Of like, I have to scope out this location for like several days, if not weeks. Find a way, into the building, out of the building. How do I get my weapons in place? How do I make sure I have all my equipment? How do I make sure I'm eating and sleeping and not missing the thing? And yeah, he's got all these, again, fake IDs, gets guns, and it's kind of the stereotypical, like how we would imagine like a highly paid assassin to do, but it does a very good job of having that cinematic realism where he still has to deal with every day, like he's got a fly commercial, and he's got to get through customs, and he's got to have money, he's got to buy
Right.
equipment and get rid of equipment. So it does a really good job of really putting this in a very realistic, grounding it really.
Yeah, and like one of the things that's like really delightful, I think, to watch in a Fincher film is like efficiency made manifest, because Fincher's a very efficient director. Like he's somebody called him once a shut up and shoot it director. Like while it seems like he's going out of his way to frame something really effectively, like a lot of times he'll have a second unit pick up stuff that otherwise would look, unremarkable, and it comes out looking great because he's like, no, just set the light there, shoot that there, use this lens, boom, and like it just comes together really clean. And I think, along with our man's choice of music, I mean, unless that comes in the graphic novel, couldn't tell you if it does or not. Like, I think Fincher maybe like sees echoes of his own like work methods in this character, and so seeing somebody who's just like really exacting and very specific with how they're performing actions, but so decidedly, right? Like, is something that he and I think Fassbender like really connected with, because Fassbender just gets lost in it, man. It's really great to watch. Like, don't get me wrong, I think Fassbender's got a lot of talent, and I'm sure he's great in Taika Waititi's new feature. But like, I like Fassbender so much more in like action thriller than I do comedy. Like, he's so great. Like, he's got he's got the clenched jaw, the cold eyes. Like, man,
I'm so dreading that movie, which I feel like we're probably gonna have to see. Next Goal Wins, the Taika Waititi
wins. Oh,
with Michael Fassbender.
You think
he's
yeah.
He's so. I was going to say Fassbender's so good in this, and he carries most of the movie. I was going to say it's broken up into, I think, 6 unique chapters as we kind of wind our way through the story, and he kind of climbs the ladder to kind of take care of everyone he needs to take care of to be a free man. And so we navigate kind of a really interesting cast of characters, and no one has a name. It's just like the killer, the expert, the client, the lawyer, these kinds of almost archetypes.
Yeah, like everybody's just kind of this like tremendous version of an idea of who they would be. Score from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, not their best, but not bad. In fact, it actually takes a pretty active role in the film, which was nice. It's a lot of tense moments where it'll kick in loud in the middle of what's an otherwise quiet scene, and will preempt action in a way that I think is like really satisfying. Reminded me a lot of like a John Carpenter score, big synths, boom boom, like They Lived, reviewed not that long ago. Otherwise, not all that remarkable. But I think what is remarkable is that this movie is only in films on theaters for a week, and then goes straight to Netflix. And like, Fincher's got to get away from Netflix, and it kills me. He's got 2 more movies to go. I'm glad they're funding him. I really am, but like it's tough because David Fincher's a big director. Yeah, he's the guy who directed Seven and Fight Club and Gone Girl, and like he's in theaters for a week. It's the same thing they did with Rian Johnson's Knives Out trilogy, right? Like they said, we'll buy you 2 more movies, but we get to dictate how they go. So Glass Onion was in theaters for a week, and that sucks. Like Glass Onion would have had a great run. I don't know if The Killer would have done that good, but it certainly would have done better than it has. And it's tough watching Apple put Scorsese and Scott in big theaters. God, Napoleon's coming out Thanksgiving, an Apple Plus picture. And meanwhile, like David Fincher's stuck in the back seat on The Killer, and yeah. I don't know. The product placement was pretty extreme too. Andy pointed that out during the movie. He's like, this is like the 8th ad we've seen. Like, yeah, it's true. It's a lot.
Well, that was the last thing I wanted to comment on. This movie is, we have our story of our killer, but it's really, in another ways, it's an indictment of kind of late stage capitalism. That's part of the reason there is so much product placement. At first, I just thought, oh, they must be playing. McDonald's is paying to get their name in here, but there are a ton of companies shown, and it relates to things happening in the story that we can't get into, but that's part of the parallel of what's happening, because part of why everything goes wrong for him is just greed from the people involved. And while it's not legitimate businesses, it is that greed that causes all of this harm and these deaths, and it's kind of paralleled with all these companies that are name dropped in the movie.
Yeah. It's it's a cool movie, and I wish I could tell more people to go see it in a theater, but I can tell you to go see it on Netflix when we get to recommendations, which I think is about where we're at. I don't want to say too much more. I think we've done a good job of kind of towing around the plot so you can get in and enjoy it for yourself. Andy, would you recommend The Killer?
Absolutely. Really fun movie, really engrossed. I was on the edge of my seat. Like, I had to go to the bathroom really bad during this, and I just was not going to get up and go because I just was afraid I was going to miss something. But great performance, great mood, action when it comes up, and like I said, a lot of it feels part spy movie, part action movie. It's making some social commentary, a lot of great cameos from actors you'll recognize that we're not going to spoil here, so highly recommend. Catch it in theaters if you can.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. The Killer's cool. You should totally check it out. Solid Fincher movie. Actually, really refreshing. I think after Mank, because that was a big departure from him. That was his dad's old script, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do it. Black and white, period picture." Yeah, The Killer's him back in form. I hope he gets a bigger budget and can be in theaters longer next time. That's The Killer. God. Now we got to talk about something I've really been looking forward to talking to on the podcast. I'm excited to get into this. Andy, do you mind bringing us in?
It's time for the death of cinema. So we are going to be talking about Crisis at Marvel. Marvel in Crisis. This big article from Variety came out yesterday, I think, or maybe it was 2 days ago. And just Marvel having a number of things all kind of going wrong at the same time. We're just going to I'll go over some of them, then we'll get into more details. Issues with Jonathan Majors, content saturation, the new Marvels film that's looking like it's not going to be very successful, VFX issues, just not knowing how to go forward, not knowing how to make this profitable, way too much spending on Disney Plus shows, and more. And so that's kind of our overview. Zach, what's your initial take?
I'm so excited to talk. You have no idea how excited I am to talk about this in this show. Okay, listen, there's a couple reasons this is satisfying. Number one, Andy and I do a movie podcast, right? Like, if you know anybody in your life who does a movie podcast, besides us, you know that this is, like, Marvel stuff is something we see a lot of, right? Like, and it's easy for us to kind of go see all of these features because we do them every week for the show and generate broad opinions. And so it's satisfying when film Twitter lines up with you and other people realize that, yeah, there may be an oversaturation of Marvel content, that, yeah, maybe Marvel's VFX aren't really holding up anymore. Sure, their casting's not so good and their storylines don't seem to connect, and it sure feels like I gotta watch 10 different features and 3 shows to keep up with what's going on in the next movie, but there's still a big deal, right? And then you can look at like box office charts and realize, oh no, okay, they're not actually doing that good. And boy, Variety comes out with this fat scoop with a bunch of people who don't want to go on record being like, I was in a meeting with Disney. It's going terrible. Mickey Mouse cried. Iger's cooked. It's so funny. Like, and I think they're gonna, let me be clear. Marvel is the biggest like film franchise maybe ever, probably ever at this point. God, I think ever. Disney is like the biggest entertainment company. There's plenty of time to write the shit. There's plenty of time to pivot. They have lots of money. It's a deep war chest. So with that in mind, please sit back and allow Andy and I to explain to you the Crisis at Marvel, because boy, it's a treat. Andy, please go ahead.
So we're going to start with Jonathan Majors. He was supposed to really helm the big bad, Kang the Conqueror, for phase 4, 5, 6. And they put it all on him, and he is going on trial at the end of this month for a domestic violence assault case that looks really bad for him. There's there's information that there's evidence that his defense is trying to seal from the public that will eventually come out at trial. So it's not looking good. And the thing is, Disney went all in on him. Apparently, the Loki show is wrapping up in the next couple of weeks, and apparently there's going to be a lot of big revelations that basically Kang the Conqueror is supposed to be the next big bad, and they don't really know what to do. They feel like they should pivot, but they don't really know how. I don't know why they haven't just think of just replacing the actor, but that's been brought up. Maybe pivoting to someone like Doctor Doom, which is a fan favorite. And allegedly, an insider was like, Disney is totally screwed by the Kang situation.
They use harsher
and I
language, and
can't
it
wait.
only gets funnier. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the PG-13 version.
The Jonathan Majors thing is so weird because like when this got announced, Andy and I were like, he's out, he's done, GG. And yeah, it's weird that he was in Quantumania, and sure they shot some of Loki, but like Loki hadn't come out yet, and everybody else was dumping him. God, CAA dumped him, like his agency, his lawyer's like, no, it's a different thing. This trial's been pushed back. It's like he's out. There's no way. We figured Magazine Dreams, his next big feature, would probably be put on ice, and as predicted by Offscript, it was. Disney put it on ice just earlier this week. But like in a world of multiverses, in a world of multiverse villains, it is not that bananas to think you could recast him and just have Kang show up as a different actor in another movie and have Ant-Man or some moron say, hey, you're not Kang, I saw him. And he'd say, there's a million billion of us. Do you think we all look the same? Game over. Done. But I don't think they can, because like I don't think those are the only projects they've been in. Now that Loki season 2 has come out, obviously he was very engaged in that. I don't know if they have contracts. I don't know what the deal is, but like it seems like the mouse is not sure that getting rid of him is the move, and it's funny because like it just feels like on paper it'd be so easy, but I don't know what kind of spider web they got in the back. They got so many things luring into each other and characters from one show that walk into a movie that it's hard to keep up.
Yeah, it's not. It's very hard to pivot away when you put all your chips on this character, and this is not what they did in phase 1, 2, 3. Like Marvel phase 1 was about getting the Avengers together, and Loki was kind of the big villain. And then in phase 2, they began to very slowly, very subtly tease Kang in after credit scenes. He wasn't the focus. Sorry, not Kang, Thanos. And then we don't actually see Thanos until Infinity War. So late into phase 3, and you know, it was easier to deal with that. I mean, it would have been terrible if they would have had to pivot away, but you can do something. You can right the ship. Switching to a whole different character, I think, is not possible. If they don't write this, what's gonna happen is what happened to Star Wars, where they just stop. They're like, we're gonna stop, put everything on ice, and figure out how to restart, which could take years because Star Wars hasn't recovered since 2019. They have yet to get a movie pushed.
Right. They're still working it out. Then they've greenlit and then functionally flunked multiple writers and directors trying to get a project out. You know, I think another issue is content saturation that's talked about in here. There's been this big push to grow Disney Plus, especially in the pandemic when Star Wars was not doing that good. Reportedly, Iger and Chapek both had the same company line. They were like, hit the gas on Marvel. We're going to make a ton of Marvel, right? There's going to be a Marvel show coming out every week or a movie. Like there will be something around the water cooler year round for people to talk about regarding Marvel. It will always be a part of the conversation. And it's like, you can't be that surprised that people aren't getting excited about something that's now regular and common, right? Like if we're talking about Marvel all year, I don't care about Marvel all year. Like Game of Thrones was cool because the season finale happened. Then it was like, oh my God, we'll have to wait all summer. You know, like apparently not with Marvel. They didn't think that was going to be a problem. It's crazy.
Initially, it kind of worked because they had like WandaVision,
Loki,
Falcon Winter Soldier,
and
like their shows flowed right into each other really well. But it was just kind of the beginning, and they were still tied into the movies a little bit. But yeah, it was just too much of a good thing. When Infinity War and Endgame came out, there were no movies between that. It was literally not like 12 months of no Marvel, and that's part of what helped build the hype. Of course, we didn't have Disney Plus just then, but that's part of what happened, and that led into other problems of just trying to push all the VFX artists to, you know, a bunch of unreasonable deadlines, basically poor production because they were trying to rush everything. So scripts weren't finished and finalized. The VFX stuff was pushed. I mean, they're talking about they were still doing VFX work after like shows had started. Like, so like She-Hulk episode 1 came out and they're still working on episode 7. Like it was not ready at all. or episode. Those shows are short; they're only like 5 or 6 episodes. Is real bad. Apparently, the scripts weren't finished as well. The first episode of She-Hulk was apparently the second to last episode,
Yeah.
and they ended up changing the reverse order, and that messed everything. Thing like the Marvels was supposed to come out before Ant-Man 3, and that also that throws everything off in the production, the VFX artists. It's just they're trying to do too much, and it's just ruining kind of everything.
Yeah, like it's and imagine being the VFX company who has to like scramble to reshuffle a whole Disney Plus show like weeks before release because a group of execs were like, "Nah, this sucks. Rewrite it, make it better." And they spent like 25 million on every episode of She-Hulk, which puts it at nearly total the same budget as Avengers Endgame. So you guys could have made a cast and crew studded incredible feature for 2 hours in theaters, or you made She-Hulk. And the reason it costs so much is horrific planning, like really poor pre-production and then forcing post-production to try to fix it to cover it up. Like, this is not the first time they've done this. They seem to do this a lot, and that's not how you make smart movies. We've been talking about this for months on this show. I mean, Quantumania really suffered, and reportedly, apparently, even at like big theater screenings, like premieres, like red carpet stuff. There's people in this Variety article saying at closed door screenings, they were showing CGI that wasn't finished, like out of focus stuff in public formal screenings. And it's like, oh my God, like who let this happen? How is Disney letting this happen? And the answer is they're not planning. Like they're spread way too thin, and they just doesn't seem to be a central pillar here, which is funny because the central pillar is supposed to be Kevin Feige, right? Like that's supposed to be the guy. That's the guy Nia DaCosta points to when she says the Marvels is really Kevin Feige's movie. He also seems to be the reason she took off from the production months before it was over. Like crazy. This is her $250 million feature, and she's like, nope. But she's pointing it away. It's that guy. That's the guy you want, right? Raise your pitchforks at him. Like, I don't know what's coming in the Marvels, but I'm not confident.
Yeah, it's looking to open pretty weak for a Marvel movie, and especially like the first Captain Marvel was $1 billion movie. So, but that, I mean, Marvel had such goodwill then, and now it has none, and so it's not looking good. You have two heroes in that movie that you will not know if you have not watched the TV shows from literally years ago. It's just, man, it's not looking good. And the release date has been moved twice because it was supposed to come out in February or like in the spring and then the summer, and now it finally got pushed to November. And we haven't had a good Marvel movie since Guardians 3, which is kind of unrelated to the larger Marvel universe, really. So it's not looking good. And I think what makes it even worse is we've heard rumors of what they want to do moving forward, and it's just bad idea after a bad idea, to the point that there's talk of trying to bring back like the original Avengers, including like dead characters like Robert Downey Jr. and Scarlett Johansson, and just like, hand wave them away, multiverse something or other, and just get them all back on screen. That sounds like a terrible idea. And apparently for Avengers Secret Wars, Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man are supposed to be the leaders, and I'm like, how are we ever going to get there? Like, there's just no way. It's cooked.
Yeah, it's cooked. Yeah, there's mention of Mahershala Ali's Blade in here, which, I mean, we covered on the show. That film got canceled like weeks before production was supposed to start, and now it's pushed to 2025, and they have a new writer, which is like their 5th or 6th crack at a script. Apparently, he's talking about leaving the production. He's like, I've been attached to this for 4 years now. What the hell are they doing? Why does it take so long to get Snow White in theaters? Why can't they make a Star Wars movie? Why is Marvel spinning out of control? I think the answer may be leadership, right? Like, I know people talk about Kevin Feige, put it all together, but like, maybe it's time for somebody new. You know what I mean? Maybe it's time for a new brain trust. The same might be said of Bob Iger, who came back after the pandemic, after Chapek got in there and did his thing. And even now he seems to be thinking, hey, I shouldn't have come back. This is a terrible thing. Like, ultimately, Andy's right. Like, Marvel, at least before 2020, was a name that quickly became associated with quality. When you saw the Marvel title on something, you knew it was going to be a good time at the movies. Now, I don't think people are as confident. I don't think people feel that way. I think people see Marvel and Disney Plus and they roll their eyes and scroll the next 5 Marvel things. Like, it's just a saturation problem, among other things. But like, I think broadly, that's the biggest issue. And for what it's worth, Iger did say not long ago that they're going to be screwing down on this, that they're only going to make 1 or 2 a year, I think, maybe 3. I think they're going to kind
Yeah.
of back off on TV shows, save a little money, especially for this big Hulu acquire from Comcast, which is coming up. I don't know. Like I think, like I said at the top, I think they have time to right the ship, but my God, like boy, it doesn't look it from here. Like they gotta get the stuff together.
Well, and it's interesting that they wrote the playbook on how to do these movies, and they're not following their own playbook. Like they've introduced a bunch of new heroes that no one really knows, and they just haven't brought them back. Like in the early phases, we had like Captain America 1, Captain America 2, Captain America 3. Like we would see our heroes multiple times, and they would show up in other people's movies. Now, like we haven't seen Shang-Chi in several years, the Eternals in several years, the new Black Widow. Like, where are these people? And like, why haven't we seen more of them? And why haven't they, like, we should be nearing like a group film by now, and we're not. The closest thing is going to be, I guess, Thunderbolts, which is at a year away. And I think this is all going to be in shambles. There's no way we're getting to these next Avengers movies in the Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, which are not till 2025, 2026. Like that's so far out that might as well be 100 years out. Like it's never going to happen.
Right. Who is going to care by then? And like, I don't know. I think Disney's got to pivot here. I think Andy, you might be right. Like if they end up going too far, like onto ice, it's too thin, they'll just freeze and stop. That's what they did with Star Wars, right? They dropped that Darth Maul was back and alive and well in the live action universe in Solo, and they never made another Star Wars. They were like, big reveal, not making any more of these. You know, they're gonna figure it out and they'll retcon where they need to. It would be weird to think that there's a theater schedule without Marvel in it, right? I mean, we've been doing it for so long, and they have been a titan for 11 years. But Marvel might be a little cooked, and I think they just need to pivot. And they need to pivot and figure out what they're doing. Warner Brothers is foaming at the mouth with James Gunn at the head of DC. They cannot wait to try to get on top of this and fill this superhero void. But let's remember, they're not exactly having an easy go of it either. I don't know how Aquaman 2 is going to do, but Flash bombed, dude. And superhero movies are in a weird place. If Marvel's turns out to be the bomb it may be, and it has the budget that it's estimated to, it will be right next to Indiana Jones and The Flash as one of the biggest bombs of the year. Might even take the title. And the fact that 2 of those 3 films would be Disney films, and 2 of those 3 worst films of the year would be superhero movies is worth mentioning, you know? Like, maybe people want something different. Maybe you can look at the current landscape with Five Nights at Freddy's and the Eras Tour Kills the Flower Moon and think, you know what? Maybe people are looking for something a little bit more unique. That can happen at Marvel. That there's plenty of room for that to happen. Comics are an incredible medium at which to tell stories. Like, oh my God, like a wealth of stuff. But I think they're going to have to be a little bit more creative going forward. They're going to have to do something.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Western. That's been one of the big comparisons because the Western had its heyday in the 50s and 60s where that's all anyone was making because they were so successful, so profitable. And then it's kind of the same thing happened. It became oversaturated and it never went away. And that's what is going to happen here. The superhero genre will never go away. It'll be like the Western. It will be less overwhelming content, but we're always going to have superhero movies. We may just maybe not have 16 a year like we are right now.
Yeah. Anyway, that's Variety's Crisis at Marvel article. I'm really glad we got to talk about it. This is one of the things I love about doing this show. I can take all my exciting film Twitter opinions and just share them with you right here through the power of the internet, from creator to createe, right? The way it's supposed to be. But speaking of sincere projects, we got to talk about this next. I know, terrible segue. We got to talk about this next film. Really excited to talk about this. This is one we missed when it came to theaters. Didn't hear a lot about it, but since then we've heard a bit of a buzz. Andy's going to take the summary on. Andy, please take it away.
Past Lives. So this is the directorial debut from Celine Song, who's a playwright. This premiered at Sundance last January, and we've heard tons of buzz about this. So much that this is one of the year's great films. a lot of Oscar buzz about it. And recently, Guillermo del Toro came out and said this is the best directorial debut in the last 20 years, meaning first film from a new director. Um, and so we just had to check it out, see what it's all about. Little bit of hype to go along with it. So let me tell you what it's all about. It is a kind of Korean American drama where we meet two young friends, Nora and Hae Sung. We meet them in Korea, in Seoul, in the year 2000. They are childhood friends at the age of 12. They have a big crush on each other. And they know it. They kind of have a little play date with each other, and their parents as chaperones, and it's really fun. But Nora will very soon be immigrating to Canada and then the U.S. Imminently, and so they have this budding romance, and then immediately she leaves the country. They reconnect later in life, first 12 years later, and then again 12 years later after that in their 30s, at which point Hae Sung comes to visit the girl he hasn't seen in 24 years, who at this point, and there's a lot given away in the trailer, but it's also part of the premise of at this point she is grown up, she's an adult, she's married, and it's about like these relationships you have at different points in life. It's a very beautifully well shot movie. I see where all the buzz is about it, because it feels like a classic movie. I recently watched Breakfast at Tiffany's and Roman Holiday, and the city is so much a part of those movies, and that's the feel we get here. It's shot on location in New York. You have all the famous sites, but it really uses them as part of the film. Zach, what'd you think?
So, Past Lives is kind of lightning in a bottle. I think it's from a first time director who just. I mean, rarely do you get a first time director who turns out a feature that looks this stellar. She also wrote it. It is a really great script. Past Lives is a movie about insecurity, which is weird. At least I think it's about a few other things than that, right? Relationships and romance and loss and longing, and I totally get that. But ultimately, like, everybody in Past Lives is written so brutally honest. Nobody lies. Nobody fibs. Nobody like holds back their opinion because of what somebody else says. When one character asks another how they feel, they just explain it. They just say, "Hey, here's how I feel. Here's how I am." When Nora's husband Arthur says, "Hey, is this guy attractive to you?" Like, and she's like, "Yeah." Not really, but like, yeah, I think he's an attractive person, It's uncomfortable. Like, it's uncomfortable for us to watch. It's uncomfortable for Arthur to feel. And when Hae Sung comes over and sees her for the first time, and she's kind of excited to see him, and he's like stunned. It's uncomfortable, right? Like, it's this long, awkward silence. It's uncomfortable for us to watch. And it like feeds on these very human feelings that we all share, like these feelings of surprise and embarrassment, of nonconformity, even in the face of like different cultures, because this is very half South Korea, half American. Like, that stuff is really humble and really sincere and really intimate, and like it works all the better in a film that is subversive and takes an angle you wouldn't expect with a story that you've heard before, namely in explaining it to you. There's a scene, Nora and Arthur are both writers, and there's a scene where Arthur explains to Nora, he's like, in any other, if somebody else was writing this story that we're in, like, I'd be the bad guy, right? Like, I'm not the husband who's been here the whole time that you hate, and this guy comes along and sweeps you off your feet like Prince Charming. He's like, I'd be the villain of this story. And it's so charming to have a film that comments on that trope, that idea, but also like manages to build something really profound by going a different direction from what would otherwise be a really generic romance. Like, really sharp, really great first time work. Excited to talk about it. Andy, where do we jump in?
So I'd like to talk about the look of this movie, because I think that's one of the things that really caught people's attention. Like I said, it's shot largely in New York City, and it just makes such good use of locations. Again, we get things like the Brooklyn Bridge, the Statue of Liberty, Chinatown, but it really uses these backdrops effectively to place our characters in. And it takes quite a while for them to kind of get to that part. That's the part that's sold in the trailer quite a bit. But it also takes us a while to get there. And a lot of the movie is also just it's people on screens, because when they initially connect in their 20s, it's via social media, and they start texting and eventually start video calling, but it's 2012 video chatting, so the screens aren't great, and it's a lot of acting on both sides. And that actually reminds me, these two actors did not meet in person until like they actually like met on set to shoot, and they purposely stayed away, like they didn't rehearse together even like remotely. They purposely stayed away from each other so they could have that really fresh, never met this person before in my life kind of feel.
Right. Like, yeah, this other entity that I've just heard about and heard talked about, right, but have never actually engaged with. Yeah, this movie looks stunning. Like, this does not look like work from a first-time director. Like, I couldn't believe how effective some of the framing is. There's this brilliant little montage when Hae Sung first gets into New York, and he's at his hotel, and he goes from the airport to the cab to the hotel, gets inside, gets a coffee, he's kind of hanging out and getting his bearings. And it's rainy, and it's framed so cleverly, like in ways you would never think to shoot something, because Celine Song is very explicitly making decisions behind the camera to try to present the world that she sees, and that's such a delight. Like, that's what you want to see, right? You don't want people shooting generic, you want people shooting a voice. They have something to say, and she does. There's shots of this film that start as a landscape. There's a great scene where Hae Sung and Nora are walking through a park by a bridge, and it opens as a landscape shot. It's big on the bridge, huge wide lenses in this movie, and you see just these two characters just kind of walking along the bottom, and the camera kind of just slowly pans with them, and before you know it, they kind of come walking on the sidewalk in one like clean 4-minute take where they're just like chatting about catching up. You know, how have things been? How have you been over there? How are you here? I can't believe how good this movie looks. Like, it's really stellar, and like lots of good long takes too. It's funny, when I cut the trailer package for Past Lives so we could run it here on the show, a lot of the shots in the trailer are like 8 seconds long, too long for YouTube. Like, couldn't even get on there, right? The Killer trailer, meanwhile, Fincher, is like lightning fast cuts, and I know trailers are edited by different people, but like, I just think Past Lives is so much more willing to linger and so much more willing to spend time in a space, and to push its characters like in the frame into like uncomfortable moments. And I think that's really sharp. It's really great work.
Yeah, and what's also stunning is our narrative, our writing. There's this concept of Inyun that's mentioned in the film, and it's kind of like Providence, and it's talks about a certain kind of connection that people have. And the reason it's called Past Lives is they discuss, who were we to each other in past lives, that we end up together now. And there's also the idea that maybe we will end up together in a different life, and this is one of our, like, we're now living one of our, what will be a past life, and they have this really strong connection. But it's really profound look at who we are at different points in our lives. Nora's husband doesn't know kind of the younger child version of her. He knows her as an adult and playwright, and Hae Sung knows the child version of her that he grew up with, but he has not known as an adult until he comes to visit. So it's kind of who we are and the potential of what we maybe could have been had life just gone differently.
Yeah, like it's a film with a crossroads in it, right? And Nora goes one way and Hae Sung goes the other, and it's so fascinating that come Act 2, when they kind of start to reignite for the third time in present day, Hae Sung comes to visit New York, and Arthur doesn't contest to them spending time together. In fact, encourages it. You two should go out, show him whatever, like go hit the city, and they make plans and go do things, and they don't even really fill him in on it. At the end of the night, they get back to his apartment. He's like, "So what'd you guys do today?" "Oh, we went to Ellis Island." "Really? I've never done that." Like, spending time with Nora, doing things that like even he has not done, like creating memories that he can't be a part of. And it's so fascinating that he gives it the space to do that, right? Like so many generic characters mentioned earlier, like would no, they would protest, hey, that makes me uncomfortable. But he doesn't, because he knows that it's important to her. And they talk about that, and they have really honest adult conversations about it. It's shockingly refreshing and really healthy. Additionally, like he makes sure to give the two of them space to not only like explore their own feelings, but to move the plot. Like, and so we get the pleasure of this in the audience's seat, right? Of seeing these two kind of reconnect and see what that means, and if they still have a connection, and where that might go. It's really tremendous. Like, and it's so small, right? Like, I feel like I keep comparing it to After Sun, but like in the same way, like practically micro budget, like actors and actresses I've never seen, but like emotions that I won't get from any few other films this year. You know what I mean? And like, it's really stellar work.
Yeah, it reminds me, one of the things I wanted to talk about is this film's about identity, and our three main characters are very different. Nora is Korean American. She grew up in Korea for 12 years, and then in the West after that. Her husband is fully American and Jewish, and then Hae Sung has only lived in Korea his whole life, so he's fully Korean. And she has this great line that she says when she's with him, she feels simultaneously less Korean because she doesn't speak Korean near as well as him and hasn't grown up there as often, and also simultaneously more Korean because it's more than she kind of experiences in her everyday life. The movie uses language as a very interesting piece of identity because they're so close because of their language, even though they haven't seen each other in 20 years. Where her husband, while he knows a little bit of Korean, that's not something he speaks, and so he's a bit of an outsider in that way. But it's just the theme of identities is really interesting in the movie, and again, it's really mature stuff. You can see the playwright writing, really digging into these characters.
Yep. It's another great acquire for A24. It's something small and intimate that I think is going to stand the test of time. Like, it's a really cool flick. I don't have much more to say about it, Andy. I think I'm running out of things. Anything else for recommendations?
I think I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Past Lives?
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely one of the best films we've seen. I've seen this year. It's very profound. It's interesting. It gets a little slow paced for me at times, but it is incredibly well shot, especially for a first time director. It's a very, like I said, deep and profound film about love and destiny and identity, like I said, and great performances from, I didn't name them before, Greta Lee and Tae Yu as Hae Sung. So really, really phenomenal first film. I'm excited to see what Celine Song does next.
Yeah, me too. I know. I was just looking at it. I know Celine Song has another deal with A24. She's working on a film called Materialist. I don't know anything about it, but apparently A24 was like, "Yep, absolutely, we want you to do another one with us." So that's tremendous. Past Lives is great. You should absolutely go watch it. There's no real qualms about it. It is. I'm gonna say, it's not like adult in the way that it's like graphic content or anything, but like a child would be bored out of their minds watching this movie. Like,
Yeah.
it's a thoughtful
Mature
kind of
themes.
film. Yeah, right. It's like an hour 45, like not too bad. I think Past Lives is good stuff. You should totally check it out. Unfortunately, it's only available via VOD. That being said, I think it's worth the price of admission, especially if maybe you got a cinephile significant other who might want to take in Past Lives. I think it'd be worth it. But if your partner's not super into weird movies like that, probably not. But yeah, I think you should check out Past Lives. It's a great time. And that's our show. Oh my gosh, Andy, episode God, what are we on 231 this week?
231.
Good Lord, coming up on that big 250. What are we gonna do? What are we watching next week?
So we're gonna be on break this week. There's just a couple of small releases. Priscilla, the Elvis, or not the Elvis, the movie about Priscilla Presley is coming out this week. Just as an FYI, we're going to be returning on November 14th with The Marvels, the big new MCU film. We're going to see what that's all about, and finally, we're going to get to Anatomy of a Fall, the film that we had talked about seeing last week, but we had to just get in and see the killer instead. Also releasing on November 10th is The Holdovers, which is Alexander Payne's new movie starring Paul Giamatti. He, of course, famously did Sideways almost 20 years ago. So that's just knowing that those are out there. But The Marvels, Anatomy of a Fall are the ones we'll be covering.
Hold on, we got a new Paul Giamatti movie coming out, and we gotta go see The Marvels. That's fine. I wish I was more excited about it. I am excited about talking about it. That's going to be good stuff because I always like talking about movies on this show. That's what we do here on Outscript. We talk movies every single week, every Tuesday. And if you liked what you heard this week, you like the movies we talked about, maybe you didn't like the movies we talked about, maybe you have something to say about our reviews or our hot takes on Marvel or the like, the best way you can correspond with us is probably via email. Email's pretty direct, man. It's hard to deny it doesn't work. Mail at offscriptfilmreview.com. We are available there. You can also comment on our posts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the usual social media stuff. We're around. You can find us on YouTube where we post our episodes all the time. Big things happening over on YouTube. Please come check it out. Of course, we're on all the usual podcast outlets, iTunes, Spotify, Google, iHeartMedia. You might be listening to one of us on there right now. You might be listening to us on an outlet that I didn't list, but is still, important, and we're glad you're here. And of course, you can see other things we do at offscriptfilmreview.com. The most important thing you could do if you like the show, the biggest solid you can do us, it doesn't even cost you a dime, which is crazy. Everything costs money now, is you can just subscribe. Just subscribe to Offscript Film Review to get your new episodes delivered straight to your phone or your favorite device every single week, except for next week because we'll be off. But otherwise, we'll be back with The Marvels, Anatomy of a Fall. Excited to talk about it. From all of us at Offscript, the home of Bolt Cinema, I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Thanks for watching.